Hong Kong, 1972. The city breathes differently at night, louder, hungrier, electric with ambition and noise. Outside a massive indoor boxing arena, Bruce Lee walks the exterior perimeter alone, hands loose at his sides, pace unhurried. Bruce Lee is not performing tonight. Bruce Lee is attending as a guest. Nobody at the door knows Bruce Lee's name yet. Bruce Lee enters the backstage corridor through a side entrance, concrete walls, hanging bare bulbs casting amber pools on the floor, the distant roar of the filling arena audible through thick walls. Event staff move around Bruce Lee carrying equipment, cables, water buckets. Bruce Lee moves through all of it quietly, finding his own line through the organized chaos backstage. Promoter Ray Sung spots Bruce Lee near the corridor entrance and crosses quickly with both hands extended. Ray Sung greets Bruce Lee warmly, a genuine handshake, a broad smile, grateful words about Bruce Lee accepting the invitation tonight. Bruce Lee shakes Ray Sung's hand with equal warmth, responding quietly, nodding. Bruce Lee is easy here, comfortable, without performance or pretension. Further down the backstage corridor, Danny Rourke leans against the concrete wall with both arms crossed over his brown leather jacket. Danny Rourke is broad, heavy-shouldered, dirty blonde hair pushed back from a thick jaw. Danny Rourke is not a scheduled fighter tonight. Danny Rourke is here because Danny Rourke goes where fights are. Danny Rourke is always where fights are. Danny Rourke's eyes find Bruce Lee the moment Bruce Lee enters the corridor's deeper section. Danny Rourke watches Bruce Lee exchange words with Ray Sung. Danny Rourke's eyes travel Bruce Lee's frame, the lean build, the quiet manner, the plain black jacket. Danny Rourke's jaw shifts sideways. Danny Rourke makes a fast private calculation and arrives at the wrong answer entirely. Bruce Lee finds an empty wooden chair in a quieter section of the backstage corridor and sits. Bruce Lee sets both hands on his knees, closes his eyes briefly, and breathes, settling into the environment, feeling the energy of the building around him. Backstage noise continues on all sides. Bruce Lee exists inside it like a stone inside moving water. Still. Through the thick corridor walls, the arena crowd noise swells as more bodies fill the seats outside. Thousands of voices combining into a single sustained hum that vibrates through the concrete beneath Bruce Lee's feet. Bruce Lee feels it, the crowd's collective energy, rising before the first bout even begins. Bruce Lee opens his eyes. Bruce Lee listens to the building breathe. Across the corridor, Danny Rourke leans toward his companion Joe Mack, a wiry, sharp-faced man in a gray shirt, and says something low. Joe Mack glances toward Bruce Lee and back to Danny Rourke. Both men laugh, the specific laugh of people sharing a private contempt. Danny Rourke's eyes stay on Bruce Lee while Danny Rourke laughs. Danny Rourke is already planning something. Bruce Lee rolls each shoulder slowly, stretches both arms outward, then folds them back in. Bruce Lee's eyes remain closed through the stretch, internal focus complete, external noise irrelevant. The backstage corridor buzzes around Bruce Lee. Fighters tape hands nearby. Staff shout across each other. Danny Rourke watches Bruce Lee from across the corridor. Bruce Lee is aware of everything, including Danny Rourke. Storyboard 2. The Fan with a Grudge. Danny Rourke pushes past two event staff members without acknowledgement, shoulder first, not slowing, treating the corridor like Danny Rourke owns it. One staff member starts to object. Danny Rourke looks at the staff member with flat, dismissive eyes. The staff member stops objecting. Danny Rourke continues down the corridor. Danny Rourke moves like someone who has never been told to stop. Not once. Danny Rourke spots Bruce Lee sitting in the quieter section of the backstage corridor and stops walking. Danny Rourke stares for one long moment, taking in Bruce Lee's stillness, Bruce Lee's plain jacket, Bruce Lee's closed eyes. Danny Rourke's mouth pulls into a wide, slow smirk, the smirk of someone who has mistaken stillness for weakness. Danny Rourke begins walking again, toward Bruce Lee. Danny Rourke approaches Bruce Lee with the deliberate, unhurried pace of a man performing confidence for an audience, even when the audience is only Joe Mack trailing behind. Danny Rourke's boots are loud on the corridor floor. Danny Rourke's shoulders are rolled back. Danny Rourke's chin is up. Every element of Danny Rourke's approach is designed to communicate one thing: dominance. It communicates something else entirely. Bruce Lee opens his eyes as Danny Rourke arrives within 3 feet. Bruce Lee looks at Danny Rourke with an expression that is completely neutral. No alarm, no welcome, no curiosity performed for Danny Rourke's benefit. Bruce Lee simply sees Danny Rourke the way Bruce Lee sees everything, completely and without distortion. Bruce Lee waits to understand what Danny Rourke wants before responding to Danny Rourke. Danny Rourke plants both feet and stands directly over Bruce Lee's seated position, using the height advantage deliberately, looking down at Bruce Lee the way someone looks down at something smaller than expected. Danny Rourke crosses both arms over the brown leather jacket. The posture says, "I have decided this interaction already." Danny Rourke has decided wrong. Bruce Lee looks up without moving his head back. Danny Rourke speaks loudly, loud enough for the nearby event staff to hear, loud enough to be a performance rather than a conversation. Danny Rourke tells Bruce Lee that Danny Rourke has seen Bruce Lee's movies. Danny Rourke says the movies are very impressive for someone Danny Rourke's size could fold in half. Danny Rourke laughs at Danny Rourke's own words. The corridor goes quieter around them. Bruce Lee looks at Danny Rourke with the same neutral expression Bruce Lee entered the corridor with: unchanged, unperformed, unafraid. Bruce Lee does not respond to Danny Rourke's words. Bruce Lee simply holds eye contact with Danny Rourke in a way that is not aggressive but is completely, uncomfortably present. Danny Rourke's laugh fades slightly at the edges. Danny Rourke covers the fade with more volume. Joe Mack leans against the corridor wall with both arms folded and a wide grin stretched across his sharp face. Joe Mack is enjoying Danny Rourke's performance enormously. Joe Mack nods approvingly at Danny Rourke's words, adding short encouragements between Danny Rourke's sentences. Joe Mack has never been in a real fight in Joe Mack's life. Joe Mack enjoys watching Danny Rourke start them for Joe Mack. The event staff nearby have slowed their movement. 2 fighters taping hands in the corner have stopped taping. The corridor has developed a new quality, the held breath quality of people witnessing something they don't want to be part of but cannot look away from. Nobody intervenes. Nobody steps between Danny Rourke and Bruce Lee. The corridor watches. Bruce Lee sits. Danny Rourke performs. The distance between them narrows. Storyboard 3, words like weapons. Danny Rourke jabs one thick finger toward Bruce Lee's face, not touching, stopping 2 inches short, but close enough to be an unmistakable invasion of space. Danny Rourke tells Bruce Lee that all those flying kicks look very pretty on a movie screen. Danny Rourke wants to know if Bruce Lee can do any of it when someone isn't being paid to fall down for Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee does not flinch from the extended finger, does not lean back, does not look at the finger. Bruce Lee maintains eye contact with Danny Rourke's eyes, only Danny Rourke's eyes, and breathes slowly and evenly. The stillness is not passivity. The stillness is the specific composure of someone who has already assessed Danny Rourke completely and found nothing requiring urgency in Danny Rourke. Danny Rourke steps back from Bruce Lee and begins performing an exaggerated imitation of kung fu movements, wide theatrical stances, slow-motion strikes aimed at nothing, exaggerated ki sounds. Danny Rourke looks at Joe Mack while performing. Joe Mack laughs loudly. 2 younger fighters nearby laugh cautiously. The corridor has become Danny Rourke's stage. Danny Rourke feeds on every sound of approval around Danny Rourke. Bruce Lee watches Danny Rourke's performance with an expression that has not changed since Danny Rourke arrived. Not amusement, not anger, not contempt. The focused, neutral attention of someone watching a thing very carefully for information rather than entertainment. Bruce Lee's hands remain on Bruce Lee's knees. Bruce Lee's breathing remains even. Danny Rourke performs. Bruce Lee catalogs. These are 2 completely different activities happening simultaneously. Joe Mack's laughter is the loudest thing in the corridor. Joe Mack slaps the wall behind Joe Mack with an open palm, doubling forward. Joe Mack tells Danny Rourke the impression is perfect. Joe Mack points at Bruce Lee and says something cutting about movie stars who cannot fight without a camera. Joe Mack's words carry down the corridor. Several staff members look at the floor. The event staff have fully stopped working. 4 of them cluster near the far corridor wall, watching the scene between Danny Rourke and Bruce Lee with expressions mixing discomfort, fascination, and the paralysis of people who do not know whose authority applies here. Nobody has the role of stopping this. Nobody steps forward. The corridor holds its collective breath and watches Danny Rourke continue performing for Danny Rourke. Bruce Lee rises from the wooden chair. Not fast, not in reaction to Danny Rourke's words or performance. Bruce Lee simply stands, the way a person stands when a decision has been reached internally and the body follows naturally. Bruce Lee unfolds to full height. The corridor's energy shifts immediately, subtle, instant, like a pressure change before weather. Danny Rourke stops performing mid-movement. Danny Rourke recovers from the surprise of Bruce Lee standing within 1 second, the recovery of someone practiced at not showing uncertainty. Danny Rourke steps back 1 involuntary step, catches it, pushes back to original position. Danny Rourke covers the step with a louder laugh and points at Bruce Lee again, telling Joe Mack that now the movie star has decided to stand up. Very scary. Danny Rourke laughs louder than the moment requires, the specific overloud laugh of someone compensating for something felt internally. Danny Rourke points at Bruce Lee with both hands now, turning to the small corridor audience, narrating Bruce Lee's standing as if it is the punchline to Danny Rourke's joke. Bruce Lee stands completely still at full height. Bruce Lee has not said 1 word yet. Not one. Storyboard 4, The Sucker Punch Attempt. Danny Rourke moves back toward Bruce Lee, closing the distance again, re-establishing the proximity Danny Rourke lost when Bruce Lee stood. Danny Rourke leans in close, voice dropping from performance volume to something lower and more private. The voice Danny Rourke uses when Danny Rourke wants only the target to hear. Danny Rourke tells Bruce Lee that movie fighting and real fighting are completely different things entirely. Bruce Lee meets Danny Rourke's eyes from close distance without blinking, without stepping back, without any adjustment. The eye contact is total and direct, not aggressive, not challenging in performance, simply completely present. Danny Rourke is close enough now that Danny Rourke can see Bruce Lee's expression has not changed since Danny Rourke first approached. This should tell Danny Rourke something. Danny Rourke does not read it correctly. Danny Rourke's eyes cut sideways, a fast half-second glance at Joe Mack across the corridor. Joe Mack straightens against the wall slightly, reading Danny Rourke's glance. A signal passes between Danny Rourke and Joe Mack that has passed between them before in other corridors, outside other venues. Joe Mack's expression sharpens. Joe Mack gives Danny Rourke 1 small nod. The corridor does not notice the exchange. Bruce Lee does. Danny Rourke's right hand drops from its crossed-arm position slowly, casual, as if Danny Rourke is simply relaxing the posture. Danny Rourke continues talking, voice maintaining performance rhythm, eyes on Bruce Lee's face. But the right hand is coiling now behind the edge of the brown leather jacket, weight shifting, wrist rotating. The mechanics of a sucker punch, assembling invisibly beneath the surface of Danny Rourke's performance. Danny Rourke launches the sucker punch, a full right-hand swing driving from Danny Rourke's hip toward Bruce Lee's jaw, loaded with Danny Rourke's full body weight, thrown with the momentum of someone absolutely certain the target does not see it coming. The punch is fast. The punch is committed. The punch is everything Danny Rourke has decided this moment will be. The punch finds nothing. Bruce Lee's head is not there. Bruce Lee has slipped. A minimal rotation, a half-step offline, weight transferred to the rear foot in a movement so small and so precise that from a distance it looks like Bruce Lee simply leaned. Danny Rourke's fist completes its full arc through empty air where Bruce Lee's jaw was located 1/4 of a second ago. The air moves. Nothing else does. Danny Rourke's full committed swing through empty air sends Danny Rourke stumbling forward, 1 large lurching step. Then a second scrambling step as Danny Rourke's momentum carries Danny Rourke's body past Bruce Lee completely. Danny Rourke's shoulder grazes the corridor wall. Danny Rourke's free hand slaps concrete trying to arrest the forward fall. The sound of Danny Rourke's palm hitting the wall echoes down the corridor sharply. Danny Rourke's stumble carries Danny Rourke several feet past Bruce Lee before Danny Rourke regains footing. Danny Rourke spins around, breathing hard, face red, the performance completely gone now, replaced by something rawer and less controlled. The corridor is absolutely silent. Joe Mack has pushed off the wall. The event staff have stopped moving entirely. Everyone is looking at the same two men in the same corridor. The backstage corridor holds a silence so complete that the arena crowd noise through the walls becomes the only sound, thousands of voices from another world, separated by concrete and distance. Danny Rourke stands breathing. Bruce Lee stands breathing. Both men face each other in the corridor's amber light. Danny Rourke's missed punch has changed the air between them permanently. Everyone present feels this. Nobody moves yet. Storyboard 5, 3 seconds. Bruce Lee pivots on the rear foot, weight redistributing, hips squaring, both hands rising to centerline in a position so natural it looks like breathing. Bruce Lee does not advance on Danny Rourke. Bruce Lee simply becomes ready, the specific readiness of someone who has stopped waiting and started responding. The pivot takes less than 1 second. The corridor watches it happen and understands something has changed. Danny Rourke scrambles upright from the corridor wall and turns back toward Bruce Lee, face flushed, jaw set, the humiliation of the missed punch converting instantly into aggression. Danny Rourke's eyes are hot now. Danny Rourke's composure is fully gone. What remains is simpler and more dangerous in Danny Rourke's own estimation, pure forward momentum. Danny Rourke does not think. Danny Rourke charges toward Bruce Lee directly. Danny Rourke throws a second punch, a wild right-hand swing, more desperate than the first, elbow too high, shoulder overcommitted, anger overriding mechanics. The punch has power but no precision. The punch has intention but no structure. Danny Rourke throws the punch the way someone throws something when they are no longer thinking, with everything they have, aimed at everything they fear. Bruce Lee watches it arrive. Bruce Lee's left arm rises in a clean pak-sao, a redirecting deflection that meets Danny Rourke's incoming forearm and angles it offline without absorbing its force. The deflection uses Danny Rourke's own momentum to carry Danny Rourke's arm past Bruce Lee's centerline. The movement takes a fraction of a second. The movement is effortless in appearance. It is not effortless. It is 10,000 hours of deliberate practice arriving. Bruce Lee's right fist strikes Danny Rourke's jaw in the same breath as the deflection, one continuous motion, deflect and counter, no gap between. The strike is precise, linear, delivered with the complete structure of Bruce Lee's body behind it, foot, hip, shoulder, fist arriving as one connected force. The sound of impact is clean and definitive. Danny Rourke's head snaps backward on Danny Rourke's neck sharply. Danny Rourke's head snaps back. Danny Rourke's body follows the head, weight transferring backward, heels lifting from the floor, the full architecture of Danny Rourke's balance dismantling in real time. Danny Rourke reels backward, 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps, each step a little more desperate than the last. Danny Rourke's arms windmilling for balance Danny Rourke's body can no longer locate or provide. Danny Rourke's back connects with the corridor wall, the same wall Danny Rourke's palm slapped moments ago during the stumble. But this time, Danny Rourke does not push off. This time, Danny Rourke's legs give way beneath Danny Rourke. Danny Rourke slides down the concrete wall slowly, jacket gathering against the rough surface, boots dragging across the corridor floor, until Danny Rourke is seated against the wall. Done. Bruce Lee's right fist returns to Bruce Lee's side in the same controlled motion it was thrown. Bruce Lee does not follow Danny Rourke to the wall, does not stand over Danny Rourke, does not raise the fist again. Bruce Lee stands where Bruce Lee stood before the counter, same position, same posture, same expression. The entire exchange from Danny Rourke's first missed punch has taken 3 seconds total. 3 seconds. From Danny Rourke's first committed sucker punch to Danny Rourke seated against the corridor wall. 3 seconds of actual contact between these two men inside the backstage corridor of a Hong Kong boxing arena in 1972. The corridor is completely silent. Bruce Lee stands. Danny Rourke sits. The arena crowd roars through the walls, entirely unaware of what has just occurred 3 seconds ago in this corridor. Storyboard 6. The Wall Moment. Danny Rourke sits against the corridor wall with both legs extended in front of Danny Rourke on the concrete floor. Danny Rourke's breathing is audible, hard, ragged, the breathing of someone whose body has absorbed a shock it did not expect and does not yet know how to process. Danny Rourke's brown leather jacket is pushed up at the shoulders from sliding down the wall. Danny Rourke does not move. Bruce Lee looks at Danny Rourke against the wall with the same neutral expression Bruce Lee has maintained throughout this entire encounter. Not satisfaction, not contempt, not pity. Simply looking, seeing Danny Rourke completely without judgment or performance. Bruce Lee's hands are at Bruce Lee's sides. Bruce Lee's breathing is calm and even. The 3 seconds of violence have left no visible mark on Bruce Lee whatsoever. Joe Mack breaks from the corridor wall and rushes toward Danny Rourke, crossing the corridor in quick steps, crouching beside Danny Rourke, reaching for Danny Rourke's arm. Joe Mack's face has lost every trace of the wide grin it carried through Danny Rourke's performance. Joe Mack's expression now is something simpler and more honest, shock, and beneath shock, a fear Joe Mack did not expect to feel tonight. The backstage crew pressed against the corridor walls have not moved from their positions. The 4 event staff who stopped working when the confrontation began are still stopped, backs against the wall, eyes wide, arms at sides. 2 fighters in the corner with half-taped hands stare at Bruce Lee. Nobody in the corridor speaks. Nobody moves toward the exit. The corridor holds its collective witness in complete silence. Danny Rourke raises one hand slowly to Danny Rourke's jaw, touching the place where Bruce Lee's fist landed, pressing gently, testing. Danny Rourke's hand is trembling, not from injury alone, from the specific physical response of a body that has experienced something the mind told it was impossible. Danny Rourke's fingers press against the jaw. Danny Rourke's jaw is real. The 3 seconds were real. Danny Rourke is beginning to understand. Danny Rourke's eyes fill. Not from pain, not primarily from pain, from something harder to name and harder to survive. The complete and total dismantling of a self-image Danny Rourke has carried through every corridor, outside every venue, in every confrontation Danny Rourke has engineered for Danny Rourke's own entertainment. Danny Rourke looks at the corridor floor. Danny Rourke blinks. The first tear moves down Danny Rourke's face uninvited. Bruce Lee turns away from Danny Rourke against the wall, not dismissively, with the quiet finality of someone for whom this is already complete. Bruce Lee turns and walks back along the corridor at the same unhurried pace Bruce Lee walked in with. The event staff part for Bruce Lee without being asked. The space opens around Bruce Lee naturally. Bruce Lee moves through it without acknowledging the parting. The event staff watch Bruce Lee walk away. The fighters in the corner watch Bruce Lee walk away. Joe Mack, crouching beside Danny Rourke, looks up and watches Bruce Lee walk away. Nobody speaks to Bruce Lee's back. Nobody calls out. The corridor simply lets Bruce Lee pass, the way spaces let pass things they have recognized as belonging to a different order than the space itself contains. Danny Rourke watches Bruce Lee walk away from Danny Rourke's position against the corridor wall. Danny Rourke watches Bruce Lee's back until Bruce Lee turns the corridor corner and disappears from sight. Danny Rourke's hand is still pressed against Danny Rourke's jaw. The second tear follows the first down Danny Rourke's face. Danny Rourke does not wipe either tear away. Danny Rourke simply sits and watches the empty corridor where Bruce Lee was. Storyboard 7. Crowd turns. Backstage crew converge on Danny Rourke slowly, 2 staff members crouching, asking if Danny Rourke is injured, reaching for Danny Rourke's arms. Danny Rourke pushes the first reaching arm away reflexively, then stops resisting. Danny Rourke lets the staff members check Danny Rourke's jaw, turning the face left, right, following their instructions with the compliance of someone whose resistance has been completely used up. Joe Mack crouches beside Danny Rourke and says nothing for a long moment. Joe Mack stares at Danny Rourke's face, at the jaw, at the tears, at the expression Danny Rourke is wearing that Joe Mack has never seen on Danny Rourke before. Joe Mack opens Joe Mack's mouth. Joe Mack closes it. Joe Mack has spent years watching Danny Rourke start things. Joe Mack has no words for watching Danny Rourke finish this way. Word moves through the backstage corridor the way word always moves in enclosed spaces, fast, person to person, changing slightly with each transfer but retaining the essential shape of what happened. Fighters and staff who were not present when Bruce Lee and Danny Rourke faced each other are now receiving the story second-hand, third-hand. Heads turn. Eyes move toward the corridor section where Danny Rourke still sits. People gather. 3 experienced fighters backstage, men who have trained for years, who understand what they are being told, turn to look at Bruce Lee at the corridor's far end. Their expressions are not the wide-eyed shock of civilians. Their expressions carry something more specific. The recognition of professionals who have just been given information that reorders something they thought they already understood about the world of fighting entirely. Bruce Lee stands at the far end of the backstage corridor, back straight, hands at sides, looking at the corridor wall rather than back at the gathered crowd around Danny Rourke. Bruce Lee is not performing distance or calm. Bruce Lee simply inhabits the end of this corridor the way Bruce Lee inhabits everything, completely, quietly, without requiring acknowledgement or witness from anyone around Bruce Lee. Promoter Ray Sung pushes through the gathering backstage crowd and reaches Bruce Lee at the corridor's end. Ray Sung's face carries the particular expression of a man who has heard something and needs to hear it confirmed before Ray Sung decides how to feel about it. Ray Sung speaks to Bruce Lee quietly, asking, with careful words, what occurred between Bruce Lee and Danny Rourke in the corridor tonight. Bruce Lee looks at Ray Sung and speaks quietly, a few short sentences, no embellishment, no narrative added to the facts. Bruce Lee's account of what happened in the corridor is shorter than the event itself. Bruce Lee does not mention Danny Rourke's mockery or Danny Rourke's performance. Bruce Lee simply states what occurred. Bruce Lee finishes speaking. Bruce Lee looks back at the corridor wall. That is all Bruce Lee has to say. Ray Sung turns and looks back down the corridor toward Danny Rourke, still seated against the wall, staff around Danny Rourke, Joe Mack still crouching nearby. Ray Sung absorbs the scene for a long moment. Ray Sung turns back to Bruce Lee. Ray Sung nods once slowly, with the nod of a man filing something important into permanent memory. Ray Sung does not ask Bruce Lee any further questions tonight. Through the thick concrete walls of the backstage corridor, the arena crowd noise rises as the first bout of the evening begins outside. The roar swells and fills the corridor with vibration, thousands of voices, feet stamping, the announcer's amplified call echoing through the walls. The outside world continues at full volume. Inside the corridor, around Danny Rourke and around Bruce Lee, everything moves at a completely different speed. Storyboard 8 Full Reversal. Danny Rourke is helped to standing by 2 event staff members, one under each arm, lifting carefully. Danny Rourke's legs find the floor, find balance, hold. Danny Rourke shrugs the staff members off once upright, not aggressively, just reflexively. Danny Rourke straightens the brown leather jacket with both hands, a habitual gesture. Danny Rourke's jaw is visibly swollen on the left side. Danny Rourke does not look at the gathered faces watching. Danny Rourke keeps the eyes down, fixed on the corridor floor at a point approximately 3 feet ahead of Danny Rourke's boots. Danny Rourke does not look at the event staff, does not look at the gathered fighters, does not look at Joe Mack standing beside Danny Rourke. Danny Rourke stares at the corridor floor and maintains that fixed point the way someone maintains a fixed point when the alternative is too much to bear. Veteran fighter Chen Bo, a compact, experienced man with a scarred eyebrow and calm, intelligent eyes, separates from the small crowd of fighters and approaches Bruce Lee at the corridor's far end. Chen Bo stops 2 feet from Bruce Lee and bows his head once, brief, genuine, the specific acknowledgement of one practitioner to another. Chen Bo says nothing beyond the bow. The bow contains everything Chen Bo wants to say. Bruce Lee receives Chen Bo's bow with a small bow of Bruce Lee's own, equal, unhurried, genuine. Bruce Lee and Chen Bo look at each other for a moment with the quiet mutual recognition of two people who understand the same language and do not need to speak it aloud to confirm the understanding. Chen Bo nods once more. Chen Bo steps back. Both men return to their own silences. In the cluster of backstage crew and fighters gathered near Danny Rourke's former wall position, hushed conversation moves rapidly. Fragments reach the corridor air, 3 seconds, didn't even see it. The sucker punch missed completely, 1 strike. The fragments carry through the corridor like sparks. Each person who receives a fragment passes it to the next person slightly larger than it arrived. The story of Bruce Lee grows in the telling. Danny Rourke pulls free from Joe Mack's supporting hand at Danny Rourke's elbow and takes one independent step forward. Then another. Danny Rourke is walking slowly, carefully, with the particular deliberateness of someone whose legs are working, but whose body is still processing something the legs had no part in. Danny Rourke moves toward the corridor's exit. Danny Rourke's shoulders are carrying something heavier than the brown leather jacket tonight. Danny Rourke walks toward the backstage exit with the head angled down, not dramatically, not performing grief, simply keeping the eyes off the faces lining the corridor walls on both sides. The corridor crowd watches Danny Rourke pass. Nobody speaks to Danny Rourke. Nobody reaches out. Nobody offers the particular social mercy of pretending not to see. The corridor simply witnesses Danny Rourke's passage toward the exit in complete, unanimous, honest silence. The corridor crowd parts for Danny Rourke without ceremony, bodies stepping aside, creating a path that Danny Rourke walks without acknowledgement. There is no cruelty in the parting. There is no celebration. The corridor simply makes room for Danny Rourke to leave the way corridors make room for things that have finished. Danny Rourke reaches the exit door. Danny Rourke pushes through it without pausing. The door swings closed behind Danny Rourke. Bruce Lee watches Danny Rourke's exit from the corridor's far end, watching the door swing closed, watching the space Danny Rourke occupied become empty space again. Bruce Lee's expression through Danny Rourke's entire walk to the exit has been the same expression Bruce Lee has worn since arriving in this corridor. Neutral, present, containing no triumph. Bruce Lee looks at the closed exit door for one breath, then looks away. Storyboard 9, Villain Exposed. Joe Mack stands alone at the corridor wall where Joe Mack spent the evening grinning and encouraging and nodding. Joe Mack's arms are at Joe Mack's sides now, not crossed, not performing anything. Joe Mack looks at the exit door Danny Rourke walked through. Joe Mack's expression has the quality of someone who has witnessed something they participated in and cannot now separate themselves from what they witnessed. Joe Mack says nothing. The event staff and fighters who witnessed tonight's corridor exchange begin telling arriving colleagues in low, careful voices, describing the mockery, the sucker punch attempt, the 3 seconds, the wall. Each telling is quiet and specific. Each listener's face goes through the same sequence. Disbelief, recalibration, a long look toward Bruce Lee at the far end of the corridor. The story moves through the backstage space like water finding level. A young fighter's apprentice named Li Shan, 17 years old, thin, wide-eyed, in a plain gray training shirt, stands at the corridor's edge having heard the story third hand from 2 fighters ahead of Li Shan. Li Shan stares at Bruce Lee from across the corridor with an expression containing no performance, no calculation, only the pure unfiltered awe of a young person encountering something that reorganizes everything Li Shan thought Li Shan understood about what is possible. Bruce Lee notices Li Shan staring from across the corridor. Bruce Lee holds the young apprentice's gaze for one moment, reading Li Shan's expression, reading what is in Li Shan's eyes. Bruce Lee rises from the wooden chair and walks across the corridor toward Li Shan with the same unhurried pace Bruce Lee uses for everything. Li Shan does not move. Li Shan does not look away. Li Shan waits. Bruce Lee stops in front of Li Shan and kneels, bringing Bruce Lee's face level with Li Shan's face, the same way Bruce Lee would speak to someone whose attention Bruce Lee wanted to receive rather than dominate. Bruce Lee speaks quietly to Li Shan in Cantonese, asking Li Shan's name first, waiting for the answer, receiving it. Then Bruce Lee speaks several sentences that only Li Shan can hear tonight. Li Shan listens to Bruce Lee with total stillness. The stillness of a young person receiving something they sense is important before they fully understand why it is important. Li Shan's wide eyes do not move from Bruce Lee's face. Li Shan does not nod along or perform understanding. Li Shan simply receives what Bruce Lee is saying the way dry ground receives water, completely, without overflow, without waste. Bruce Lee places one hand briefly on Li Shan's left shoulder, a light contact, present for 2 seconds, then lifted. The gesture is not dramatic. The gesture is not performed for the corridor audience. The gesture is simply the physical punctuation of something said between one person and another, acknowledged with the body before the conversation ends. Bruce Lee holds Li Shan's eyes for one final moment. Bruce Lee nods once. Li Shan nods back slowly, the nod going deeper than agreement, landing somewhere below the neck in the place where things are stored that do not leave. Li Shan will carry tonight for the rest of Li Shan's life. Li Shan does not know this yet, but something in Li Shan's expression already contains it, the permanent settling of a thing received from the right source at exactly the right moment. Bruce Lee rises from the crouch, straightens to full height, and turns toward the arena entrance at the corridor's far end. The entrance glows with the spilling light of the arena beyond, the crowd noise rushing through the open gap like a tide. Bruce Lee walks toward the light with both hands loose at Bruce Lee's sides. The corridor watches Bruce Lee go. Li Shan watches longest of everyone. Storyboard 10, Emotional Aftermath. Bruce Lee steps through the arena entrance and into the full light and noise of the boxing event. The crowd's roar enveloping Bruce Lee instantly. The smell of the crowd, the heat of thousands of bodies in one enclosed space, the announcer's amplified voice bouncing off the arena ceiling. Bruce Lee moves from the dim corridor into this enormous living noise and finds a seat at the arena's edge quietly. The arena crowd hum fills Bruce Lee's entire sensory field, above, around, beneath, through the vibrating floor. Bruce Lee sits and lets the crowd's collective energy wash past Bruce Lee without resistance. Inside this vast human noise, Bruce Lee is completely alone in the particular way that composed people are alone in crowds, present with everything, attached to nothing, finding the stillness at the center of enormous sound. Bruce Lee finds a seat at the arena's edge, a simple folding chair near the ringside barrier, away from the main crowd sections. Bruce Lee sits with both hands on both knees, eyes on the ring where the first bout continues. Bruce Lee watches the fighters in the ring with the same focused, quiet attention Bruce Lee brought to the backstage corridor earlier, reading, measuring, learning. Always learning. Outside the arena, Danny Rourke sits alone on the building's exterior steps, concrete cold beneath the brown leather jacket, the Hong Kong night air moving around Danny Rourke with indifference. Danny Rourke's elbows rest on Danny Rourke's knees. Danny Rourke's head is bowed. From inside the building the crowd roar is muffled, a distant pulse, a world Danny Rourke has just been removed from by 3 seconds of someone else's precision. Danny Rourke holds Danny Rourke's own jaw with both hands, cupping the swollen left side gently, feeling the tenderness that will be there tomorrow morning and the morning after. Danny Rourke is crying. Not loudly, quietly, the specific private crying of someone who has no audience and no performance left in them. Danny Rourke's tears fall onto the concrete steps between Danny Rourke's boots. The Hong Kong night receives them without comment. Joe Mack comes through the arena's side exit and spots Danny Rourke on the steps. Joe Mack sits down beside Danny Rourke without speaking. Joe Mack does not put an arm around Danny Rourke, does not offer words, does not try to reframe the evening into something more bearable through narrative. Joe Mack simply sits beside Danny Rourke on the concrete steps in the Hong Kong night and shares the silence Danny Rourke is sitting in. Inside the arena, fighters who witness the corridor exchange speak Bruce Lee's name in low tones during the bout break, passing the name from mouth to ear, fighter to fighter, corner to corner. Bruce Lee's name moves through the arena's fighter community, the way names move when they have been attached to something witnessed firsthand and undeniable. Bruce Lee's name gains weight with each passing. Bruce Lee sits at the arena's edge, unaware. Bruce Lee watches the arena action from the folding chair at the edge, composed, unhurried, present. The crowd surges and falls around Bruce Lee in waves of reaction to the ring action. Bruce Lee does not surge or fall with them. Bruce Lee watches. Bruce Lee breathes. The evening in the corridor, Danny Rourke's performance, the sucker punch, the 3 seconds. Li Shan's eyes has already settled into the past inside Bruce Lee completely. The bout ends. The arena crowd rises in final roaring acknowledgement. Bruce Lee rises with them, standing, looking at the ring, holding the moment the way the moment deserves to be held. Then Bruce Lee turns and walks toward the arena exit alone. Bruce Lee steps out into the Hong Kong night, the same streets, the same city that did not know Bruce Lee's name when the evening began. The city is learning.